Resident Evil 4 Remake is my 6th Resident Evil game, with playing the modern games and RE4 2005. I covered that game in my last video, so the link will be down in the description below. To put it in short, Resident Evil 4 2005 was an incredible game. It had awesome gameplay, charming dialogue moments, funny interactions, and has held up tremendously for a 2005 title. Heading into Remake, having played the original, I'd have to take a different approach to this review since I played the original first. I had high expectations with this game, and oh boy were those expectations met. So what exactly made Resident Evil 4 Remake an improvement from the original? Enough rambling, let's jump right into RE4 Remake. Right off the bat, this game is way more difficult than 2005. It does not play around, thanks to the DA system, which makes the game way more challenging if you play well, and it's more forgiving if you struggle a lot. I'm not the greatest Resident Evil player ever. Hell, look at my death count in the original. I'm decent at the combat, and yeah, the late game just beats my ass. It's not like I was playing in hardcore either. I was only playing on standard mode and died like 30-40 times throughout the whole game. Some parts can be frustrating as well, but it also makes the game a lot more engaging that way, as you have to keep multiple things into consideration to make the best out of your limited resources. The remake brings in crafting, which wasn't in the original release. It's a nice addition considering that the game is generous with its resources, but it's not overly generous where ammo is an afterthought and you don't even have to worry about that. You craft your ammo through resources and gunpowder. In some instances, you may want to make handgun ammo immediately to keep shooting at villagers, but you might want to save up that gunpowder to craft something more powerful like shotgun ammo. Pairing was also introduced in Remake, but it's also quite restrictive here as it requires you to use a knife that can break when pairing multiple times. You can also use a knife to get enemies off of you when you're grabbed at the cost of your knife durability, or mash A to escape their grip at the cost of your health. It's a nice way to have the player constantly think about what their next move should be. In the original, you only had the option to move the stick left to right, but in Remake, now you ask yourself, do I want to risk my health or do I want my knife to break earlier? The overall gameplay is so much cleaner in Remake, now being able to move while aiming and reloading. Visually, the game looks incredible, even on the weaker platforms like the PS4 and Xbox Series S, which is the console I'm using to play this on. It may not look as good as a PS5 or Series X versions, but 60 FPS gameplay is what matters most to me. However, there is a resolution mode, which I played around with for a few parts of the game, and it's rough. First of all, the frame rate is inconsistent, so sometimes you may get as high as 55 FPS or as low as 40 FPS. Texture popping is also more egregious here. This isn't really a complaint on the game itself. It seems that Capcom never bothered to fix this texture pop-in issue, and I'm curious to know if this happened in the other console versions of the game. So I mainly played the entire game on performance mode. The game still looked pretty good here, but the resolution mode is awful in this game. That aside though, the game looks stunning here. The original game holds up really well graphically, and Remake did an excellent job at handling the graphics for the game. I personally think Village looks better graphically, and that's mainly because of how detailed the textures are in that game. Back to Resident Evil 4, Leon's model also looks great here. Sometimes I get too focused on his hair because of how cool it looks. The character models themselves look really good, both in gameplay and in cutscene. The atmosphere is also done really well, and it's not as good as the original to me. I think Remake's atmosphere is serviceable and does a good job maintaining the original's ominous look. Something I asked myself when heading into Remake was how well would they be able to amplify the horror in this game. The original wasn't really scary, it was more so an action thriller kind of game. Remake isn't much different in terms of the horror. While the graphics are really good, the gore is there and such, it's still very action oriented. In my video on the original RE4, I mentioned that these pale looking enemies scare the shit out of me. I now know that they are called regenerators, and holy shit, they're more terrifying in Remake. I jumped out of my chair when this thing came into the room I was in and grabbed me out of nowhere. Aside from that part of the late game, I wasn't really scared throughout the entire experience. The intro sequence was done really well, with showing the dead body of one of the police officers that accompany you. You can also see villagers lighting the other police officer on fire, which may be a bit too intense for YouTube, so I'll blur it just in case. Anyway, Remake's horror isn't really much different from originals. Dealing with the Chainsaw Man in the opening chapter was admittedly somewhat scary, but if it wasn't for the broad daylight, then maybe it could have been more scary. Again, this game isn't overly terrifying, and it's one of the least horror-focused games in the series to me. It does make the gameplay more enjoyable, that way as your gun's blazing for the most part. I love the gameplay of Remake here. It's such a huge improvement from the original and all. Not to say that the original was bad necessarily, just more so it took some time to get the hang of it. Just like in the original, it's satisfying to mow down hordes of enemies and roundhouse kicking them. Stealth kills are a really neat addition here. You can use stealth kills as a way to get free kills when you get behind an enemy without being detected and kill them right away. However, this isn't used too often, neither is it a requirement in areas of the game. Not only because you'll fight enemies guns blazing, but also because of the night durability. QTEs are largely cut from the game, which honestly was a bit disappointing for me. However, I can understand why. Not everyone is willing to do QTEs over and over again like in the original. Hell, there's a fight where it's nothing but QTEs, which is the Krauser knife fight, but I'll get to the characters and boss fights later on. Like I said before, the parry is a great addition to the game and brings some extra intensity as you always stay on your toes, constantly making on-the-fly decisions. A huge change they made was not giving Ashley a health bar in the remake. In the original, she had her own dedicated health bar so you can heal her. It did keep things intense as you had to manage your resources that way in the original. Remake changes it through Ashley not having a health bar, but something like a status. When it's normal exploration, you can choose either to have her follow you or keep your distance. This was similar in the original, but she stood still when asking her to wait. Whenever she gets hurt by any enemy, she goes into an incapacitated state, meaning she can't move at all until you recover her from said state. I honestly thought protecting Ashley in Remake would prove to be a frustrating challenge thanks to how much the enemies can be damage sponges, but protecting Ashley wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Sure, some areas gave me some trouble like the church since there was just so many enemies there. The part of the castle where you had to run from meteors coming at you was hellish for me in the original. It still gave me trouble in the remake, but wasn't as bad. Or this crane part where Ashley was using a crane to create a hole in the wall, which is supposed to replace this part in the original where she went up this mountain. I think the crane is handled better as you have an open arena, so it's much easier to hold off constant enemies coming at you. In the original, that part of the game was difficult as you were in an enclosed space and had to deal with hordes of enemies and trucks that could get you killed if you weren't careful enough. The minecart section was pretty good, as I liked that they kept Luis alive for a little longer, but more on that later. The story of Resident Evil 4 Remake has a more serious tone compared to the original, whereas in that game you had lighthearted moments, but also knew when to be grounded and serious. Remake is mostly serious, and there was no doubt this would happen. Some people may say it's not good because this doesn't have the funny lines like the "no thanks bro" or the big cheese. Admittedly, I'm like that with some moments throughout the game, but I won't let it affect my thoughts on the game too much. There's an 18-year difference with the original and the remake of Resident Evil 4, and 2005 was a very different time compared to 2023. The story itself is good with its characters, interactions, dialogue, and all. The villains are handled a little better in Remake except Ramon. In original, he was a lot more memorable with his funny moments and larger screen time thanks to the radio conversations, but those were cut in the remake, at least the dialogue with the villains themselves. I suppose it was to give the villains a sense of mystery, but I'm not sure. Las Plagas, which is the parasite that infects all of the villagers that can have them turn into this thing, is injected into both Leon and Ashley. I do like how it was handled in Remake, being treated as a serious threat, but it never affected the gameplay and mostly showed in the cutscenes, which is fine and I don't mind that. I did like the hallucinations that would show up right as you're about to save Ashley and put her into a surgical procedure. I thought that was great. The story was good for having a more serious tone compared to the original, even if the original had its charm. I think Remake's story holds up pretty nicely and is a nice redo of the original. Anyways, Leon himself is the handsome guy he always was, now made to look even better in RE4 Remake. His mission is to save Ashley and bring her back home to the US president. By this point of the series, Leon is a government agent rather than a police officer, so a lot has happened since then. Leon's character is pretty good. While he doesn't have the same one-liners from the original, I still like him in Remake. Luis, on the other hand, is a solid character. They killed him off much later in Remake than the original while taking the time to bring more out of his character. In the very first scene you meet him, you run into the Big Cheese, or Mendes in the Remake. You're both tied up, and in the original, Leon and Luis have this small yet interesting conversation about their past. Luis mentions how he was a cop in Madrid and how much he put his life on the line for no one to care. Leon also talks about the Raccoon City incident as well, and mentions how he was involved in that incident in the first day in the force, which was a pretty funny moment. They cut this conversation in the remake sadly, but aside from that, Luis was handled well, and you get to play some parts of the game in a team up, which is pretty neat. One of those is the cabin fight, and as difficult as that was, it was pretty cool to see again in Remake. Working with him to progress into the mines and fight the zoo giants was great as he helped you. It's also shown that he has some work with Ada as well, but as I don't have separate ways in Remake, I'll have to play that in the original. Anyways, he gets killed off by Krauser, and I like when he's dying, Leon lights the cigarette for him, and thought that was a really nice touch. Ashley is so much better in the remake as they make her dialogue much different compared to the original. In OG, she was not much more than a person to protect and that was really it. In remake, she comes off as an actual person with emotions. I like when you land the great shot, she compliments you, which is quite nice here.
Look at you.
Some of the fights where you had her hide were different, like the two Chainsaw Sisters, she's hiding in a locker in Remake rather than a trash can in the original. There's a short yet brief part of the game where you do play as her to save Leon from being stuck in a cage, whereas in the original you played as her, but Leon was perfectly fine. In short, Remake Ashley is significantly better than the original as a character. I really liked her interactions with Leon, and the small segment where you play as her was pretty good. Ada's also here, yet briefly, as Capcom really wants you to play separate ways. I know people mention the voice actress for her is a mixed bag, and to be honest, it's fine, not great but not bad either, it's decent at best for me. It's hard to really talk much about Ada since she doesn't have much screen time in Leon's story, so again, I'll have to play separate ways and might make a separate video on that in the future at some point. Krauser sucked, man. The playable knife fight was cool to experience. Hell, either version of this fight where the QTEs or it's a direct fight are both great. It's just his dialogue isn't really that good to me. The one word to describe Krauser in Remake, it's this. Rookie. In the original, he had respect for Leon even while he turned against him. He calls Leon a comrade, and when Leon figures out that Krauser took Ashley, he said, "You catch on quick, as I expected." He has respect for Leon and knows what he's capable of, while Remake just calls him a rookie 24/7 over and over again. The boss fight was better in Remake in my opinion. The boss fight is challenging in Remake, but since the parry system is a thing, it does make the fight more intense and exciting. Just be sure you have a fully repaired knife, otherwise you're cooked. I did like how his death was handled in Remake, with him saying "I trained you well" and all of that stuff. Remake's characters are solid overall, it's mainly Krauser that was the biggest disappointment for me. The boss fights are changed up a lot from the original. QTEs are still present, but play a smaller role into the overall fight. The fish boss is largely the same as the original. The main difference is when you're hit, you're not knocked into the water. It's still a fun boss fight either way. El Gigante is way better in Remake as the fight has more spectacle thanks to Leon jumping on it, using knife to slash the giant's parasite, making the fight look a lot cooler. Big Cheese is a lot more difficult in Remake thanks to the fire getting in the way and all, which in that case when you're on fire in Remake you can't move at all. You can't open your inventory. Pretty much you can't do anything until you're back to normal. This is one of the fights where I died a bit in both versions of the game, but Big Cheese is good in both versions of the game. There's also this alien looking thing that's also a mini boss when being able to use QTEs to dodge attacks coming from above or below you. You can use liquid nitrogen to freeze it and deal damage when it's frozen in place. It's definitely intense because of the specific moment where you're waiting for an elevator taking its sweet time to descend to you. It's a nice mini boss that did scare me briefly and was handled better than the original take on this fight. The next boss, you fight two giants, the regular one and an armored one. In the original, you fought both of them on your own and were able to kill one of them using the lava pit early in the fight. In Remake, you fight it with Luis and he uses TNT on the armored one. It's a nice change from the original and Remake handles it quite nicely here. I did mention the Krauser knife fight earlier, and it's pretty cool that it's playable in Remake. Again, I just didn't like Krauser in Remake, so it makes this fight a little less exciting narratively. Ramon is difficult as hell thanks to it being an open arena and having to wait for him to be open, where in the original he was much easier. I prefer this fight in the original as it gave me less trouble. In Remake's version, I was more frustrated thanks to these acid attacks that always hit me even if I took cover. Also, Ramon seems to have more HP in Remake than the original as well, so there's that. Krauser's second fight is pretty similar to the original at its core, but there's dialogue exchanges between Leon and Krauser, like Krauser getting rid of his code of honor to gain more power. You're running to the top of the arena while avoiding these traps and engaging with Krauser directly. Once again, the parry makes this fight pretty exciting compared to the original, whereas original fighting him felt awkward in the first phase. The second phase is similar in both versions where spamming the knife is the best thing to do. He definitely is more of a challenge in Remake, and in the original is much easier, but again, this fight is handled better in Remake, but a bit harder. The final boss is Sadler, and similar to the OG, aside from these spiders that I forgot to mention because I hate these spiders with a burning passion because of how many of them spawned in the mine. Anyways, like the original, you shoot the eye by his legs and attack his main eye with the knife. You do this repeatedly, and while Remix is much more difficult, both of these versions of the Sadler fight are solid final bosses here. After that, Ada gives you a rocket launcher to beat Sadler and take him down for good. After clearing that part of the game, that concludes Resident Evil 4 Remake, a game that I really enjoyed and had a good time with. It's definitely hard to say which version is better, but I think Remake does the original game justice. I don't think you should play one version over the other. Instead, you should play both versions of the game, starting with the original first and playing Remake after. Both original and Remake are incredible games to play and replay through, so play both of them. Anyways, that's all I really have to say about Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's a great game and it's a good remake of the original. So be sure to like this video, and hey, why not subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. That'll be it for this video, and as always, enjoy yourselves and have a good one.